Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SANS Threat Analysis Rundown. It is good to see you all. My name is Katie Nichols. I'm an instructor for Forensics 578 SANS class covering cyber threat intelligence, and it is good to see everyone. We took a break for a couple months over the summer in the US, and it is awesome to be back here today to catch you up on all of the things related to cyber threats. There has been a ton going on. I don't know about you, it's a little bit overwhelming. So don't worry, I'm here to guide you through this. I'm going to highlight some of the things that I've seen trending, some interesting blog posts, reports, give you some takeaways, hopefully things you can go back to whatever your day job is, or if you're just learning in this field, that's awesome too. We're actually going to try something a little bit different today. If it doesn't work, hey, it's okay. We're going to try it. So I'm going to have Stephen pop up my screen. So this is a cool software. First off, I'm going to say this is not malware. You have my promise there. You go to slido.com and enter that number, or if you like to live on the edge, you can scan the QR code, up to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a couple of different poll questions throughout the stream. Try to get you all interacting. I know some people will comment, right, whatever platform you're tuning in. I see we have folks from the Philippines, from Bahrain, international audience today, right? But this is another way you can interact with me. So I want you to go to slido.com, right, and enter that number or scan the QR code. Again, not malware. I'm going to flash up the first question so you can start thinking about this one. We'll come back to it in a little bit. Over the last couple months, maybe this summer, if you're in North America, what was the most significant cyber threat? Think about it. We're going to talk about a couple things. I see someone's already typing. I like it. So let's start talking. You don't have to choose something that I'm going to talk about, but you can if you want to. So let's dive right in. A lot to discuss, right? It is August 29th. Can't even believe it. In the US, again, end of summer here. That means fall's coming up and US presidential elections are happening. And anyone who's a cyber threat analyst, right? We know that things that have happened before happen again. Probably not a shock to anyone that different actors are trying to influence presidential election results. So different sources we're going to go through today. We'll compile these later for you all, try to drop them in as we go as well. Right? You might have observed a couple days, a week and a half ago, right, CISA, jointly with other U.S. government agencies, put out a statement on Iranian actors influencing the campaign, which is interesting because if you think back, in previous U.S. presidential elections, different countries are interested. And any government statements, I think it's interesting to kind of look at what's the messaging, right, that's going out. U.S. government sending a clear message that interfering in our elections is not okay, right? Influence operations, targeting the American public, targeting presidential campaigns. You might have seen kind of trending in the news that former President Trump's campaign was targeted and, right, CISA confirming, yep, that was attributed to Iranian actors. So kind of interesting from a geopolitics perspective, right? We as Intel analysts, depending on your role, you might be interested in the nitty gritty though. What are the details? What happened here? What were the tactics, techniques, and procedures? So I think a day later, around the same time or earlier in August, Microsoft actually put out a report on election interference as well. So interesting, think about different countries with different motivations, right? Interfering in elections around the world. For US elections, a lot of stakes around the world, a lot of countries. And historically, again, if you've tracked previous election interference, it's been a lot about Russian actors, right? We think back a few election cycles. Now, kind of interesting, this month we've seen interference from Iranian actors. So also noting, right, Microsoft saying Russian actors still interested as well. So more details here, right? CISA, kind of a high level government messaging, right? More details here in this Microsoft report about exactly the nature of the influence campaigns. I'm a huge fan of graphics, try to simplify things. I'll show you some cool graphics throughout our reports today. Again, as analysts, we have to look at what happened in the past. not always going to be indicative of future behavior, but if we look across different elections in the US as well as other countries, including Israel, right, there's a pattern here. Different actors, and we look at the tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? Impersonation, right? Impersonating different people, amplification. Maybe there's some message out there that already exists amongst the electorate, but then, right, Iranian actors interfering to make that more prominent. So, kind of a nice overview. Again, looking at the past, what's happened in the past, to know what can we expect over the next couple months. Now, throughout today, I'm going to talk about a bunch of different reports about Iran and North Korea, ransomware. And for anything I talk about, it's really important to think about, does it actually apply to my organization? Or maybe you're just learning, or maybe you have a particular interest in a certain type of threat. But right, if you are, protecting a campaign, awesome, like presidential campaign, maybe you're involved in a non-government organization, a nonprofit, this is a report you would care a lot about. Maybe if you support a bank, you're a cybersecurity person at a university, this might not be as relevant. And so throughout all of these reports that we review, right, this is one way that I like to try to make sense of all the cyber threat reporting. Think about what actually matters for what I care about, for what my organization cares about. So if you don't care about election stuff, that's okay. We got other stuff coming up as well. Lots of details in this report about different groups. We're going to talk a little bit about group naming today, one of my favorite topics. Some of us love to hate that, but lots of different details here about influence efforts from Iranian actors as well as Russian actors. One thing I wanted to scroll to, right, these actor names, it's a lot. Really appreciate this table from Microsoft analysts talking about which group is this, and then what actual organization, right? The IRGC, the Iranian military, and then what have they done in the past? A nice summary here, because there are different groups at play. It can be really tempting to say, oh, Iranian actors, but there are a lot of different groups, a lot of different operators here. And so it's important, if you're trying to think about what tactics, techniques, and procedures should we protect against, might be slightly different between these. All right, we also have fun names here, and we're gonna talk a little bit about naming today. Lemon Sandstorm, that's a name from Microsoft. Fox Kitten, that is a group name from CrowdStrike. So those two group names overlap. Let's talk a little bit about names. The group name challenge, right? It is always a tough one. My colleague and fellow Forensics 578 instructor, John Doyle, just wrote a really great blog post on actor names. And if you've ever read these reports, right, you read the mid-sandstorm, you're like, what is happening here? What are all of these names? You can love them, you can hate them, right? But I think it's important to understand them. These names are all about identifying actors, clusters of activity. And as you've seen, different companies, right, use different structures. One thing that John did is kind of cool, and he links it in his blog post here. He created a really nice little Google sheet here, helping you keep track of what exactly are the names that different companies use. So for example, Mandiant, right? Mandiant uses this uncharacterized, uncategorized intrusion cluster scheme. So if you see something that says UNC, stands for uncharacterized, or I think it's uncategorized, right? You know that's from Mandiant. You see Storm, right? That's Microsoft. So Microsoft likes to use weather-related group names, right? Palo Alto, different approaches here. So kind of a nice reference that John has created about the kind of initial cluster methodology that these different companies use. And then you'll see a lot of companies use this methodology where often starting to track activity. Maybe there are some intrusions that are related and you don't really know who was behind the keyboard because that's kind of hard to figure out, right? But you start to overlap those TTPs over time. Maybe you get more information. Maybe you get some information about who might be behind the keyboard. You can graduate that, right? growing up, graduating to a fully fledged group. That's where you might see from Mandy an APT name, right? Microsoft, a weather name like Peach Sandstorm, etc. So just keep this in mind as we go through talking about all these group names. I know it's a lot, and the reality is, if you don't care about group names, don't worry about them, right? The more important thing that I find, rather than worrying about who names what group what, just think about what's the information that's being presented, right? What do we care about from that report? Is it the tactics, techniques, and procedures? Is it knowing who they target, what industries, etc.? So let's dive in. One of these many group names, Peach Sandstorm. And it's been interesting. Over the month of August, there's been a lot of reporting coming about Iranian actors, right? We just talked about Microsoft report election interference from Iranian actors. Then this one actually talks about Peach Sandstorm, another Iranian group, using malware known as Tickler. And again, I want you to be thinking about, what do I care about, right? For my organization or my interest. So really helpful in a lot of reports, they're going to tell you, what does this group target? Who does this group target? Right? This malware called Tickler been used in attacks against satellite communications equipment, oil and gas, federal and state government sectors. Cool. So if I'm in, government, or I support election-related work, I probably care a lot about that other report on election interference, right? Let's say I support, right, an oil and gas organization. I might care much more about this report on Peach Sandstorm. So a lot of Iranian stuff over the last couple weeks and months. We're also going to talk a little bit about ransomware later, but let's go back to that poll. Let's see what you all think. What you all think about most important, most significant cyber threat over the last few months. Let's see if anyone's voted. All right, we got a few votes. If you wanna vote, you can go over to slido.com, enter that number, or scan the QR code. It's not malware. Interesting. I see someone is a little salty. CrowdStrike was the greatest cyber threat. Touche. Not going to talk about it today, but yes, a couple weeks ago, huge issue taking down a bunch of airlines around the world when there was an error in CrowdStrike Falcon. Takeaway from that is endpoint sensors have a lot of control over your operating system. If something goes wrong, it can cause a lot of issues. So I like that. But clearly the big one here, ransomware. Man, y'all are tough. Picking on Microsoft as well. I see Scattered Spider, interesting one. That's a group definitely lurking around. I don't think we have anything today on Scattered Spider, but previous streams, also another Forensics 578 author, Will Thomas, has a bunch of info on Scattered Spider. I know that group is lurking around. Black Cat, the ransomware group. So I appreciate definitely the winner, ransomware, which we are going to talk about. I'm surprised I didn't see anyone writing Iran or writing Russia. Okay, the nation states. There we go. Someone was typing it as I was talking. So, of course, this is a loaded question. Depends, right? If you wrote "it depends," that would be okay as well. Someone saying North Korean remote IT workers. We're going to talk about that as well today. So I like it. If you want to keep typing, you're welcome to. But let's go back and dive into more of these topics. So again, Peach Sandstorm, Iranian group. I love the folks at Microsoft for the graphics they make. I think it is so tough to read one of these blogs and take away what exactly happened in the intrusion. And so really nice graphic from Microsoft explaining right, some of the TTPs they use. As we're seeing more and more, right, they compromise both on-premise endpoints as well as cloud environments like Azure. So important to be able to monitor both of those. So nice overview here. A theme we're going to see in a bunch of reporting today, especially out of Iranian actors, is the use of social media platforms like LinkedIn, right? And creating these personas to try to connect with victims, right? Then ultimately sending malware, sending links through that. So LinkedIn, I know Stephen on the back end is a big fan of LinkedIn. I like it too. But be aware, random person that connecting with you might want to be a little suspicious if they send you a link, for example. Might want to be a little cautious before clicking that. So Peach Sandstorm, just an example of actors who use LinkedIn. Password spraying, right? This is where actor tries to authenticate. They try common passwords. Maybe they have password 123 and they try 10 different people or 100 different people's accounts with that same password. A little bit different than brute force, right? Single account using a bunch of passwords. So password spraying, really, really common attack vector. And this is one that is pretty detectable, right? If you have the right things in place. So one thing to look out for Peach Sandstorm. One thing I really appreciate about Microsoft's blogs, right? In addition to the nice graphic, if you scroll down to the end, right, they have a bunch of really helpful, actionable, which intelligence should always be actionable, information and queries on how can you identify this activity. Now, this is in KQL, I believe, is the language Microsoft uses in many of their tools, but even if you don't use that query language, right, you can translate this into whatever language you use, right? Looking for failed attempts to sign in from multiple sources, right, from a single internet service provider. That's something you could translate to whatever platform you're using. So kind of a nice, nice thing that Microsoft does. And if you like your indicators, hey, sometimes they're helpful to identify malicious activity, right? Here are some domain names. You could run those in your SIEM, put them in your threat intel platform, use those however you'd like. So lots of great indicators, queries to help you detect Peach Sandstorm activity. I want to go back to the poll, and we have to a little bit, right, make fun of ourselves as analysts, right? Peach Sandstorm, I don't know about you, but I think that these kind of sound like drinks, like a nice cocktail or mocktail. So if you want to vote, which Microsoft group name sounds like the most delicious drink to you? Which out of the four of these, which one would you want to have if it's, you know, a hot evening, you're outside chilling? Peach Sandstorm, Strawberry Tempest, Caramel Tsunami, Raspberry Typhoon. If you want to play along, go to slido.com. Let's see what people want. I think I would personally prefer Raspberry Typhoon. And poking fun at this a little bit, the reality is, like, we have to have a little fun with this. One thing we do at my team at Red Canary is whoever finds the group or cluster, you get to name it. So whatever naming scheme you use, I do think that even though these names are silly sometimes and we have fun, I think there's value, because if I'm saying, oh yeah, there's that cluster of the Iranian stuff with that malware, no, you want to know exactly what do I mean, right? When I say Peach Sandstorm, you know, oh, I read a blog about that, right? So there is value in this, even though maybe it's a little bit silly. And I feel like it's okay to poke fun at these. Sherrod from Microsoft, she actually made a whole like recipe book, including drinks for drink recipes for these. So see, Strawberry Tempest, no one's a strawberry fan. I don't know. I would enjoy a Raspberry Typhoon cocktail or drink or mocktail myself. So I'm just having a little fun with those group names. Love them or hate them. Hey, it's a useful way to try to keep track of all of these different actor groups. So we talked about Peach Sandstorm a little bit. Let's talk about another Iranian group. Again, with the names, right? APT42. So if you reference John Doyle's little spreadsheet, you know APT42 is a name for Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud. Thus, you'll see their blog posts on the Google Cloud site. So government-backed actor, right? Also associated with IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, military in Iran. Again, we have to think about, does this match our threat model? Do we actually care about this reporting? High-profile users in Israel and the US, current former government officials, political campaigns, diplomats, think tanks, NGOs, academic institutions. It's an interesting one. You might be thinking, like, I don't work for, you know, election campaign. I don't care. Well, you work for a university. Do you have people who might be working on international relations topics? So might be of interest there. Credential targeting, right? We talked a little bit about password spraying. More and more we find most groups, they have a need for some kind of login, some kind of credentials. right? We see, again, we have an international audience here. I know we had someone from Bahrain. So this group might be of interest to you, right? Targeting Israel, the US quite a bit, but other countries as well. So definitely a group worth paying attention to. So APT42, one thing that's kind of cool about Google is they have visibility into all kinds of things. And my opinion is that organizations who host cloud services, email, right, they can help us as end users or as victims. Let us know if there's something. So kind of cool. Sometimes if you ever see like government-backed attackers might be trying to steal your password, kind of a neat thing that Google's doing to let people know if you've been potentially targeted by one of these groups. So a couple examples here. If you are responsible for maybe creating a user awareness program, something I've found a lot of success with, giving actual examples of what have actual phishing sites looked like. Because if you're an end user and I don't know, it's not a real thing, it's very different getting some kind of user awareness training versus, hey, here's an exact example of what actors have used to target before. So APT42 report, another great one from the team over at Google. Another Iranian flavored one, this one on a counterintelligence operation. Challenge here with the group naming, right? And I have to admit, as I was preparing, I was like, there are all these different Iranian-related blog posts. The nuance here, this one talks about a group that they assess has a weak overlap with APT42, right? First blog post, APT42, this one has a weak overlap, which sometimes people are, depending on your use case, it might not actually matter. You might just care, hey, it's an Iranian group. Let me look at the TTPs. But, right, important if you're an analyst to know an overlap isn't exactly the same. So this is on a different cluster. Just a nuance if you like to nerd out over group naming topics, right? And going back to John Doyle's blog post on this, I find that kind of visuals often help explain this. Right? And I really like this one. This is a diagram from Mandiant, right? Showing different Iranian group names. Now, one of the challenges is, again, different organizations use different names. So you hear Charming Kitten, right? That's a CrowdStrike name. Well, maybe Proofpoint, we're going to talk about a Proofpoint blog. They use the group name TA453. That's kind of a smaller cluster of what maybe CrowdStrike calls Charming Kitten. This is not super neat and clean. And so I would say use the group name of whatever source you're pulling from, right? If I'm reading a Microsoft blog post on Peach Sandstorm, just call it Peach Sandstorm. If you're not sure, right, maybe reach out to the analyst, but important to remember these group names, not exact overlaps. Sometimes there's partial overlap. Makes it a little bit confusing and might drive you to want to have a Peach Sandstorm cocktail. Moving to another one of those Iranian groups, though, TA453. Right, this is another group. This blog from Proofpoint, another perspective. Again, thinking about who would care about this. Right? This is talk about targeting a prominent religious figure with a fake podcast interview invitation. Interesting. So if you work for a religious organization, but who would be likely to accept or receive a fake podcast interview invitation? Right? Is there someone in your organization who does a lot of public speaking, right? Who might enjoy doing that kind of thing? Might be interesting to kind of disseminate this and think about if someone in your organization could be targeted similarly. So in this case, right, prominent Jewish figure, right? If you work for a religious organization, might be of particular interest here. Maybe that isn't in your threat model per se, but you might want to think about what are the tactics, techniques, and procedures. Right, so a lure sent initially, right, saying, hey, be a guest on my podcast, then sending a doc send URL. One thing I've observed is a lot of actors like to include links to legitimate sites or document hosting places, right? Maybe it's a cloud hosting. And then you're like, oh, well, I recognize DocSend. So I click. Then ultimately that contains a malicious URL. to further disseminate the malware. So interesting one. Here's where we start to get into overlaps, right? TA453, a proof point name, relates to this blog post we previously talked about from Google, right? So a lot of overlaps, again, thinking about overlaps. And I think it's always nice if any researchers from any of these organizations are watching, thank you for calling out overlaps with others' research. I think that is a great approach to take. I'm going to head back to our initial slide and see if there are any other cyber threats over the last few months that I haven't talked about and see where we are. Interesting. So nation states, it's been growing in popularity. We have some people salty about the blue screen of death that BSOD from CrowdStrike and Microsoft. Software. That's a fair one. Software is definitely a cyber threat. VMware ESXi ransomware. Oh, that's a good one. We're going to pivot to talk about ransomware in a little bit. But first, let's talk about one that I see on the slide, right? EPRK, North Korean IT workers. You missed this one. This is a fascinating story. So let's pull up. There have been a few different reports on this. I appreciate KnowBe4, which is actually a security awareness training themselves company, talking about how a North Korean fake IT worker tried to infiltrate us. And I appreciate anyone who's willing to explain, hey, we had this happen to us, any intrusion, anything that happened, right? So appreciate their transparency here. I have a comment from Laura. I think the North Korean IT could count under the nation state threat, closing the gap between that and ransomware. And we're going to talk about that, how, right, we kind of did these things and I kind of forced you to do that. Ransomware, nation states. A little bit, we're going to talk about a nation state ransomware intrusion. So in this case, fake workers. So TLDR, I really like a bottom line up front, a too long didn't read. KnowBe4 actually hired someone that later they assessed was actually a North Korean actor. So what's really fascinating is the process that this person went through, right? They interviewed, they did background checks, references, etc., and actually hired this person. Then after they sent them a laptop, found there was malware on it. Malware started to get downloaded. One interesting thing, right, to call out here, AI. I don't know about you, but I don't think anyone wrote AI as their greatest cyber threat, which maybe is good. What I've seen, and I think this is a good example of AI enhancing both the defense and our adversaries, right? I know my teams at Red Canary, we use AI to make a bunch of things in our job easier. Adversaries are also using AI, and I think this was a good example, right? The picture that the North Korean worker used was enhanced by AI. So we'll see some other examples. If you read some of the influence campaign information we shared previously, also use of AI around generating fake videos, right? Deep fakes. So I think it's interesting to look when there are these little tidbits of how are adversaries using AI. Based on what I've observed so far, and I've talked about this in a previous stream, a lot of it is kind of enhancing their work, making it easier to create fake images, etc. So good news is, right, endpoint detection response software, even though, yes, I know a couple of weeks ago it blue screened a whole bunch of machines around the world, it also is helpful at detecting malware. So KnowBe4 was alerted to that and then kind of talked to all the organizations and found out that this has actually been somewhat widespread. So if you hire IT workers, this is worth checking out. And I appreciate the team at KnowBe4 gave tips, right? They did background checks. Seems like they were inadequate here. Thinking about what would you look for if you're hiring this kind of profile? Weird discrepancies in their personal information, right? Or yes, if a new employee starts to execute malware, you should probably be asking questions about that. So if you hire IT workers, definitely check this story out. It's a fascinating one. And I think it's a good example of sometimes it's challenging as cybersecurity people We often will just focus on, okay, cool, what does the EDR sensor detect? What's the malware? But there's a whole process behind this of people doing background checks, doing interviews. Maybe need to talk to your organization, think about different pieces of that, not just detecting the malware. So that was a pretty interesting one from this summer. There has been other happenings around North Korea, right? One of our nation's state actors that, especially if you're in the US or you're in South Korea, Southeast Asia, worth paying attention to. If you've joined our live stream before, you know that I find indictments from US government, other governments to be really interesting. And so you might have seen this indictment against a North Korean actor charged for involvement in ransomware attacks. Similar to Laura's comment, wait, we're combining the different categories of threats. In cyber threat intel, we so often talk about what's their motivation. Are they criminally motivated, right? Financially motivated? Are they motivated by espionage? Are they motivated by disrupting or influencing? Well, here we have a North Korean government actor who was involved in ransomware attacks. Just highlighting the fact that sometimes, right, our categorizations, actors aren't going to neatly fall into one or the other. Right? There are different reasons. For North Korea, for example, maybe they want to make money, right? Some might have actors be involved in ransomware intrusions to make money, and then maybe while they're there, they also could steal information. So really important to think about increasingly these categories we use. They're often adversaries who fall into more than one. And right, this overview from the Department of Justice says, yeah, ransomware proceeds, using those to fund different aspects of what the North Korean government is doing. So as always, I like to look at the actual indictment itself. I think these are fascinating, right? Just the use of legal action to try to influence and disrupt adversaries. The cool thing from a kind of analyst perspective is sometimes you'll get information about intrusions or TTPs or indicators that you might not see elsewhere. So these are often kind of long. We see, of course, our fun multiple names here. Andariel, Onyx, Sleet. You know, that's a Microsoft name because it's weather related. Whatever name you call it, North Korean group. So they talk about the victims. And one thing I find interesting about indictments like this one is the time span, right? When you look here at Kansas Hospital, victimized in 2021, right? This is 2022, a bunch of 2022, 2023. And I don't know about you, I find it really frustrating sometimes that organizations keep getting compromised with ransomware. And you might be thinking, like, what are governments around the world doing? Well, the reality is, if you're trying to compile a case like this, it takes time. That's what this shows us, is all these intrusions from all of these years, right? The US Department of Justice had to collect information about each of these. Kind of interesting, NASA got compromised in February 2022. Don't always see acknowledgement that government agencies themselves have been compromised. So that's an interesting tidbit from this indictment, right? Air Force bases, interesting as well. Energy company, defense company. Again, looking at these victims can give you a sense, is this an actor that I need to pay attention to? So depending on what you care about, you might care about some of the victim information, right? Maybe you care a little bit about the TTPs, the malware families that were used. One thing that I like to look at, are there any interesting indicators, or what are the file names? So this was called Maui, right? Maui malware family, Maui.exe. I found sometimes, maybe you found this if you're working in intrusions, you see something like this and you're like, wait, I remember that from 3 years ago. So interesting to also see the impact. And I'm going to talk more about ransomware in a bit. Impact. In this case, right, this hospital in Kansas, medical services were limited, had to cancel patient appointments. We see this over and over again, right? Disruption can cause impact to patients in these hospitals. I haven't always seen this. Kind of interesting. There's actually a screenshot of the ransom note itself in this indictment. So other things you might find interesting depending on what you care about. Right? M.exe was the file name of malware in another intrusion. I don't know if you're a defender, single letter file name.exe might be something to go hunt for, might be kind of interesting. All right, more North Korean stuff, reporting, right? And again, interesting to think about how ransomware, also espionage motivations, and this was an example of kind of international cooperation, US government, UK government, South Korean government as well. You see, this is also related to Andariel, Onyx, Sleet. And if you were looking for kind of more details, right, kind of indictment, that's kind of high level, talks about the actor, talks about the victims more. If you're looking for the nitty gritty, this report has it, right? Well organized by the different MITRE attack tactics that the actors used and techniques. So as we think about, do I care about this report? If you're in these industries, right? Defense industry, aerospace, nuclear, engineering, really important to always think about what industry, what threats are important, what's actually hitting my organization. So diving into this, right, you see lots of details. We know that often vulnerabilities in public-facing software are exploited. Helpful to identify a bunch of different vulnerabilities here. One thing that I like to call out, because yes, we should pay attention to 0 days. However, if you look at the years of the vulnerabilities this group has exploited, they date all the way back to 2017. So if you haven't patched a vulnerability from 2017, I highly recommend you jump off this stream and get on that. So adversaries still exploiting older vulnerabilities, right? Important to pay attention to that. So lots of details here, more than we have time to get into. But if you care about North Korean activity, Onyx, Sleet, one of the group names here, check out this report. A lot of great examples. One thing that I find kind of interesting in the reconnaissance commands actors use, right? NetStat, it displays information about network connections. What you can look at is actually the flags that are used in that command line. And you might not have thought of this, but if you've ever used command line and typed something in, you probably have a pattern for what order do you put those flags, those options in. This actually might be something interesting, right? If you start to see the same ordering, right, you could put this in any order. It could be NAOP, it could be POAN, etc. If you start to see the same order, that might be an interesting pivot point that you could start to cluster. I see the same order here and there. Obviously, it's low fidelity, so you'd want to look for other things, but kind of an interesting tidbit. Even the order of command line flags could be something interesting if you're clustering intrusions. All right, let's move on from North Korea. Let's talk about ransomware. This was actually the top cyber threat over the last couple months that you all voted for. So if you need help navigating all of the tools that ransomware actors use, luckily Will Thomas, his Bushido token on Twitter, Forensics 578, Instructor, and 589, right? New cyber criminal course from SANS. He's created this awesome ransomware tool matrix. If you care about ransomware, check this thing out. It is chock full of information. It's actually hosted on GitHub. He has a little explainer blog. Has a ton of details about what are the different tools that ransomware groups and actors use in different parts of their intrusions. One, if you've joined us before, heard of RMM tools, remote monitoring and management, right? And these are tools that are really commonly used legitimately in enterprises. These are tools like AnyDesk. And the challenge with any tool that's legitimate is adversaries can sometimes use it, right? They're living off the tools that are in the environment already. So RMM tools used for exfiltration, right? Credential theft, etc. On the intel side, right, listing of different threat groups, different actors, right? And we talked about names earlier. One of the interesting nuances, is GitHub down? Oh no, it's okay. GitHub will come back eventually. One of the interesting nuances of ransomware actors is we often just accept their names as is, right? If they say they're Black Basta, well, we just accept that that's what we call them, Black Basta. Just something to think about as we discuss actor names today. So when GitHub is back up, go check that out. A lot of great references there. If you were overwhelmed with ransomware, I find these high-level summary reports to be really useful. Reviewing the first half of 2024, this is from the folks at Palo Alto Unit 42, looking at trends, right? If you don't have time to read every single one of these reports, you want to know, like, who are the groups, who are the actors I should be paying attention to, can give you a nice starting point. I mentioned that we often, accept the group names from the ransomware actors themselves. Well, Palo Alto Unit 42, they actually use their own names here, Ambitious Scorpius, rather than accepting the self-named ransomware actors Black Cat. So kind of an interesting nuance there. Looking at industries, again, thinking about who should care about ransomware most. If you're in manufacturing, healthcare, we talked about, right, hospitals, patient care being affected, construction. And in thinking about actor motivations, any sector that's ripe for disruptions, downtime, if that really impacts your business, yeah, ransomware actors are probably going to want to give you a bad day. So again, with the names, if you need to reference names, good to see that. Taking a look at the leak sites, it's kind of interesting to see, again, actors, as they steal information, they will post leaked information to their dark websites. You can see the number of reports on those leak sites over months. It's important to note that this isn't perfect, right? Sometimes actors will post data multiple times, but it gives us maybe a rough sense of approximate volume. So 2023 compared to 2024 looks like June was a little lower. Does that mean that ransomware was less bad in June? Not necessarily, but there were fewer leak site reports. So kind of interesting to take a look at there. Let's see, another blended threat. And I know we had a comment in here, scrolling up, Chris, wondering on the overlap in North Korean side, wondering if the espionage and criminal actors in North Korean government are separate agencies, or are they one and the same? Yeah, one thing I've observed in intrusions, like, it might not even be like different agencies or different teams, like the same actor could be working for the government during the day and then moonlighting as for a criminal organization, right? So sometimes the same actor might have multiple motivations, or there have been cases where two different groups or two different agencies from the same government. I think a classic example is the DNC compromise, right? APT 28 and 29 were both in the DNC networks. Pretty fascinating. So interesting to think about these overlapping motivations. On that same thread, right, this one came out literally yesterday, right? Iranian-based actors enabling ransomware on US organizations. So just another example of this blended threat, right? It's not as easy as saying, okay, you're just state-sponsored, so you care about espionage. No, we have to think about how actors might have multiple motivations at the same time, right? You see FBI assessing the Iranian actors trying to develop that access, then collaborate with ransomware affiliates to deploy ransomware. So again, the challenge with ransomware, often whoever gains the initial access might not be the person who's doing the actual exfiltration and encryption. Just another challenge in this web of reporting that we have to unwind here. So if you like your group names, we got group names here, right? This one, very delicious sounding lemon sandstorm is a Microsoft name. Again, if you don't care about the group names, don't worry about it. If you care about if you're in one of these organizations, schools, governments, financial, healthcare, cool. Go look at the TTPs, think about if you're protected. If you don't care about the names, don't worry about them, right? And again, I think US governments around the world realize that defenders want details. So nice to see a lot of detail in here, right? Vulnerability is called out. Again, this can help you prioritize. If you have any system administrators out there responsible for patching, you have a tough job, but this can maybe help you prioritize which vulnerabilities to care about first. All right, so Iranian ransomware, other ransomware reports to look at. Blackbyte. This is one that has definitely been going around this summer quite a bit. Kind of a nice blend here. There's folks at Cisco Talos, tried and true TTPs and tradecraft, newly disclosed vulnerabilities. So I know someone mentioned earlier in our word cloud, our Slido poll, the ESXi, right? VMware ESXi servers, how an organization maintains their virtual machines and provisions those. And sometimes that software has a vulnerability. So actors using that. Some commonalities, right? Remember back, let's go back to Will's GitHub repo. There we go. We talked about remote monitoring and management tools, RMM tools, and I'll drop this link again these are tools used legitimately, often by IT professionals to provide help desk support. There are a lot of these. And one nice thing that Will's done here is listed out the tool name, what's the RMM tool, and then which groups have used it. So we see, for example, right, there's Cisco Talos report on Blackbyte, right? Will's on it. He has Blackbyte listed on as using AnyDesk. So kind of helpful to take a look here. And if I had to prioritize, which of these tools do I need to look for in my environment? AnyDesk used by quite a few of these actors. So if you care about ransomware, which you probably should, regardless of what organization you're in, another good one to take a look at. Our last ransomware report, we had folks from the DFIR report on, what I want to say, last year. Always a source that I pay attention to. This one came out just this week, taking a look at Black Suit ransomware. This is one that's developed more over the last couple months, become a little more prevalent, but as always, and as you've heard if you've joined the stream before, the good news about this is, though Black Suit might not be a group you've tracked for a long time, TTPs, the tools, are the same old ones that we've seen before. SharpHound, System BC, Cobalt Strike, built-in systems tools. Again, if you are tracking these tools, if you have detections on them, pretty good chance that you're going to be able to catch this actor. So this intrusion from December 2023, right, still going to be relevant. Actors are still using these TTPs, even if Black Suit ransomware decides that they don't exist anymore. Another actor comes up under another name, we see again and again the same tactics, techniques, and procedures, as well as tools being reused over and over. So again, DFIR report, awesome work here, worth diving into. I appreciate that they share the actual details. So if you are trying to write analytics or figure out what should I hunt for in my organization, a lot of rich detail here for you. Ransomware, I would argue, yep, pretty significant threat. Let's go back to our polls here. Let's see what you all think about risks. Go to slido.com if you already have it up. I know some of you do. You can enter that number. Which type of threat between these options do you think presents the most risk? State-sponsored, ransomware, or my favorite answer, it depends. We'll give folks a moment. Think about that. My favorite answer is it depends, but that's kind of a cop-out answer, right? We'll give folks a moment. Go ahead, head over to slido.com. And I've also set you up for a challenge here in that this is kind of a false dichotomy. It's a false choice because what we just talked about, right? Iranian actors deploying ransomware, passing off access to different affiliates. Yeah, it's a tough one. Let's see. Okay, ransomware leading so far. It depends, making a strong showing here. It depends is my favorite answer. It is a cop-out answer. But yeah, in this division, I would choose I would choose it depends. But ignoring that answer, I would personally choose ransomware, right? I think that state-sponsored threats are there, but I found this community, though we often focus a lot on state-sponsored threats, you think about what's going to be most harmful to most organizations, right? What's going to impact patient care if you're a hospital? What's going to result in downtime if you're a school or university? It's more likely to be ransomware. That said, this is an interesting debate, so feel free argue with your friends respectfully, of course, on which one you think presents the greatest threat. All right, let's see. We are running up on time, so I want to highlight this Microsoft post. Again, I've highlighted how I really enjoy Microsoft's visuals, and this caught my eye because not just graphics, but they actually have little GIFs here, little looped videos. If you were paying attention to anything in the cloud world, you know that tokens are really important. And I found that trying to figure out some of the details of what logs capture what information about tokens, what are tokens, how do I think about tokens? Let's back up, right? Token, it's an authentication artifact that grants you access to resources. And one cool thing that they did, I think metaphors are really helpful. Anytime you're trying to explain something to someone, right, they have this concept of, let's imagine you're at a carnival, right, or an amusement park. You want to ride on a ride. Well, you can't just go up to the roller coaster and say, I want to get on. No, first you have to go to the ticket office. You have to buy a ticket. And then you go to the roller coaster and you say, here's your ticket. I want to get on the roller coaster. That's what this graphic is explaining, right? And this is how tokens work. So user says to the identity provider, yep, this is like you're going to the ticket office and you're saying, cool, give me my ticket. So the identity provider gives you your token, your ticket. And then as a user, I go to whatever my application is and I say, cool, I have my ticket, give me access. And whatever that relying party or application is, they say, cool, you got the ticket, you can go on the roller coaster. I thought this was a cool way to break it down, right? Session token versus access token. And the amusement park analogy really helps me to think through this. The other thing I like that they called out, right? Same way you could get a day pass to an amusement park or a season pass, right? Tokens last different amounts of time. Maybe a token lasts 12 hours. Maybe it lasts 24 hours or 12 months. Why do we care about tokens? Because adversaries can steal them and use our access, right, to gain access to applications, to other sites. And again, I think of this, I like the metaphor of stealing my ticket. If I drop my ticket to the amusement park ride, right, someone can steal it and then gain access to that ride. So something a little different, but I just wanted to call that out because I thought it was a really neat graphic. And if you're not familiar with token theft, maybe that metaphor helps you a little bit to think through that. All right, we didn't quite get to everything, but we are coming up on time. And I wanted to be absolutely sure to talk about this last thing, kind of important to me because I'm co-chairing this event. SANS Cyber Threat Intelligence Summit is coming up. I don't know about you, I can't believe it's almost September. I'm not quite planning ahead to 2025 other than this summit, which is one of my absolute favorite events of the year. Right, save the dates, right? The summit itself, January 27th through 28th. If you can come in person, we're going to be in my home state, Alexandria, Virginia. Also, this is totally free, live online. If you want to join us virtually from anywhere in the world, we would love to have you. I also wanted to call out, we are accepting presentation ideas. So myself and my colleagues, Rebecca and Rick, as well as a great board, we're going to be reviewing all these presentations. So if you are interested, if you have an idea for a talk, we love to hear from new presenters. Even if you have never presented before, that's totally fine, right? We love new presenters, new ideas. If something I've talked about today, if you totally disagree with it, if you have a new idea, right? You want to talk about group names or ransomware or some actor that no one's heard of, we would love to hear your proposal. So take a look. We have some ideas here. Yes, you should submit. And if you need a little help, some references here, right? I have a blog post that I wrote previously about writing a conference proposals. So even if you've never done it before, would love to see your proposal to the SANS CTI Summit. But definitely save the date. I think you can actually register already for the live online option. So love to see you there. Mark your calendar, January 27th through 28th, 2025. Can't even believe it. Almost September. We got to start planning ahead. All right. We covered a ton today. I hope you enjoyed our live stream. Hope you found some benefits. I know you have a huge reading list now. Drop those links into the comments for you to check out. That's all we have for you today, folks. Again, I'm Katie Nichols, Forensics 578 instructor. Thanks so much for joining our live stream. We hope to see you in a future month of the SANS Threat Analysis Rundown. Take care.